Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Please leave a review or a rating on Apple or Spotify if you like the show. It only takes a moment and it really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Today's grief tip is all about communication. Communication is so important with our partners, with our families, with our friends, our medical team. It's important with everyone that we talk to. And when it comes to our partners, we just expect them to know what it is that we need. And they don't always know. And sometimes we have to blatantly tell them exactly what we do or don't need when going through infertility or loss. Sometimes we may not even know what we need, and that's okay too. We can tell them we don't know. But keeping the communication open helps ensure that you both get your needs met. You both are going through the struggle to get pregnant, or you both lost a baby. You're both hurting in your own way. Talk to each other openly, even about the hard parts. And it should help you grieve together and heal together. So today's business spotlight is from Sarah, who was actually a guest on the podcast earlier this season. And here's what she had to say about her business.
Hey there, I'm Sarah, your pregnancy after loss doula. Having already lost a baby before and having been through the journey of pregnancy after loss, I get it. The mix of nerves and excitement that comes with a pregnancy after losing a beloved little one. I've been right there in those feelings. But you know what? Amidst the anxiety, there's also room for joy and hope in another pregnancy. Catch me on Instagram at PalDoula. That's at PALDOULA for some free support. And if you ever want to chat one-on-one, whether by text or video, I'm here for that too. The PalDoula is all about lending a helping hand and sprinkling a little bit of hope into the journey of pregnancy after loss. Looking forward to connecting with you whenever you're ready.
Thank you for sharing with us, Sarah. So today I am talking with Carmen. She is the mother of 11 babies, 3 of which are living, and she is currently pregnant with her rainbow baby. She went through recurrent losses, including miscarriage, miscarriage, and 2 termination for medical reasons. She also wrote a book based on her experiences called A Diary to Our Babies. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Carmen. Carmen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. I am Carmen. I am a mother of 11 babies. And I always like to say there's 3 that are with me and there's 7 that aren't, but they are always with me. And there is one currently inside. So yeah, we're always walking on this, building our family journey. And with that, our journey, yeah, has definitely been a roller coaster. And it's always those things, if you could have had a crystal ball to look back on or tell your younger self what this would have looked like. It's truly incredible, but you would have never believed yourself, I guess, in any case. So yeah, I can jump into kind of where our journey began. We started trying for a family in 2015, just after we had went to Peru on our official honeymoon. And we had waited 2 years till we went on our honeymoon, and we had actually had a cake baked for us in the mountains up in Peru, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So we were really truly in cloud 9, I like to say, because we were up in the mountains of Machu Picchu, in like the clouds are right beside us.
That sounds amazing.
It was amazing. So it was a great time. We were just, all awe-inspired, and so we got home. We found out we were pregnant in November, and we basically I told almost all my best friends right away. Like, it was just instant, we're pregnant. And we kind of, yeah, I always say that was the most almost like present I've ever been in my life was during that time with my first baby. Just everything, I mean, it's so cliche, but seemed brighter because I was doing it with someone. So it was like, you visited a friend, but suddenly that was monumental and I needed to write it down somewhere. And just even how we shared with different people. And I always say too, those are memories that I will always have and cherish. And I am grateful for that blissful naivete at that time. But yeah, I came from a family of my mom who had five of us hellions. But we she never did experience loss. And so it was very like I was brought up just you have babies and that's what you do. And I also work as a nurse and I had actually and it's always in looking back, but there was a couple times that I experienced other women going through miscarriage, but and as awful as it was, and I remember just going home really, really reflecting on those cases, it was never going to happen to me, obviously, like because it didn't apply to me. And so it's like I did know, but it's embarrassing to admit how much I really didn't know. So we were kind of queuing up to share with our family at the 12-week mark, even though we had shared mostly with all the main people. And just like shy of like maybe 4 days prior to that, we found out we had suffered a missed miscarriage. And so as far as I knew, baby was still growing. And so baby was 9 weeks gestation when it stopped growing, and then we lost at around the 12-week mark. And there's so many ways this conversation can go, but I remember being on the other side of the curtain and just the doctor saying, go home, this will pass, take Tylenol and Advil. And I was just so dumbfounded. And it was just how quickly, like, didn't know I was writing this story for this baby, or it felt like from day one, just with everyone I shared it with. I had put pregnancy tests in the oven when the oven was on. So note to self, don't do that. So again, these are like, they are happy memories, but at the time it was so devastating. But we do get a chuckle out of it now. But yeah, so that was our first loss. And so that would have been January of 2016. And then we did go on to have another pregnancy very quickly after. And then we lost that baby in May, and it just already shifted from I was writing everything down. I was like so in awe. I had made a locket for my mom saying, baby coming in August, like just all those things. And this time around, we had went for a internal ultrasound, and this is at the 8-week mark, and they said, it might just be baby's too small or too young or too it's too early. And so still pretty naive, I guess, because I was still like, okay, yeah, that's fair. And we had went on another little getaway together, and started miscarrying then, and it was a very different type of miscarriage, just because the last time it just happened kind of sporadically, whereas this was more like a gradual miscarriage. And I just remember my husband and we got so drunk. We were actually in Newfoundland and trying to walk up these like those hilly streets and stuff, and how we got home we don't know, but it went from one extreme to the other, the things you do, right? And I was just completely like just numb and wanted to be numb. And I did though, and I still have that, where I took like a napkin and I just really quickly jotted some like bullet points on the baby, like just I was eating ice cream all the time, or different things. But how quickly that had already changed. Like before I was like taking pictures and I was like all these things. So that baby we lost at 10 weeks. And then we did actually go to a fertility clinic, because and I don't know if it's the same in the States, but we were always told, after 3 miscarriages, then we can go kind of down that road to look into fertility. And for us, very fortunately, fertility was not our issue. but it changed the medical terminology again because it was like, I don't want this to sound harsh, but just like another drop in the bucket where it was like, okay, just another miscarriage and then we can investigate. And for us, it's not another, it's another baby lost, right? Another dream of what that's going to be and look like for your family. And so I do have to say I was very grateful for my doctor for even suggesting it because right away I was like, yes, like we're doing that now. Like um so sure enough, we booked the appointment and they were doing some blood work and different things. And we were pregnant again. And it felt very hypocritical that and like she was such a great doctor, but she's like, oh, hi, Fertile Myrtle. And I felt I looking back, I was so um almost mortified just to be stepping in there and seeing these other people going through fertility treatment. And here I was. So it was like this weird, I was grateful to be there, but then I instantly felt like, I don't belong here. And why did I sign up for this? And yeah, you just the guilt and the shame that's always kind of there. And so yeah, we were having our I think it was every 2 week ultrasounds at that point, and then we graduated at the 12-week mark. And I remember hearing that heartbeat for the first time, and I just bawled, because that was the first heartbeat I actually ever heard. So um kind of fast forward, we we walked out of those halls seeing people crying and being like, okay, we're out of the woods now. Like here we go. And um at the I want to say, yeah, I think it was 20 weeks. We did the anatomy scan and I was like again naive in saying that we've made it past the 12-week safe zone and now we're good. And I was just like the 20-week ultrasound in my mind was just an exciting opportunity to see baby, right? It was never something that I worried about. And so you did the test. I actually was doing Northern nursing at the time as well. And so I was up for 2 weeks. And when I came back, I got a phone call um, that baby's heart was backwards. And that brought up a whole bunch of things and I could talk forever, but um I was like, how, like, what does that even mean? Like being a nurse myself too, like backwards, like that's, I just, it seems so bizarre. And so we started going through all the thoughts with that. And then in so many more investigations, but they did find out that our daughter had DeGeorge syndrome. And kind of the heart in her case was the tip of the iceberg. So they said like there was going to be a lot of other issues, but her heart, and these are the things we live with forever that we'll never really know. But she might have needed 8 to 10 surgeries in the first year of life, and that's and this is where it's to a fault. Like being a nurse, I know too much, and as much as you always hold on to hope, I know that there's surviving the surgeries, but then there's also like risk of stroke, infection, like there's all the complications that come too. So it's just it felt um it anyways, it just was like I just at that point, and it just shows how your mindset changes. I had wished I had had a miscarriage, which I can only say that from not to downplay miscarriage by any means at all. I think it's just again where this journey takes you in perspective. And because then I didn't have like the decision was made for me, I guess.
Right.
And um so anyways, there like again it's there's so much to say on each thing, but I had logged into a doctor friend's university website, or sorry, like portal, like library, and just like researching everything through the nights, like every single case study, everything. um but truly the odds were just not good for a girl, and her name was Kaya Bell. We elect I elected to actually deliver her because I truly, again, at this stage in my story, believe that was the only baby I may ever hold or would ever hold. Um, And it's messed up because I always say it was the most horrifyingly beautiful moment of my life. And I know a lot of other lost moms who can say the same thing, just because it was so pure, and she was still our baby girl. She is our baby girl. And I remember when we did deliver her, and I literally thought nothing of this. I posted to my Facebook profile. Um, and it wasn't like showing her so much, but it was kind of like she was tucked in my arms. And so you could see that like it was a baby, but like her face was tucked in, that kind of thing. And I remember it was kind of 50-50, but people like, oh, how could you post that? And but then there was the other side too, where it opened up this portal again of people like my mom's age reaching out and saying, oh, like, 22 years ago, I lost a son, and that was kind of the start of something that I didn't know was something back then. So it was like, wow, like suddenly this community that I thought never existed or nobody else went through this, because it really truly felt like that. I knew nobody else my age. And that's the other thing. I wasn't like quote unquote old, so everyone was like, why do you have like these old people problems already? And it was just, I know the things. And then
Didn't know that loss was an old people problem.
thank you. And that's the other thing. You're like, oh, I didn't even know how to like, and then you start to question, yeah, why am I having old people problems? Or like, I don't,
Right.
you just like, what is wrong? Like, um, so yeah, so I posted that, started getting like quite a few people reaching out like privately. But the reason, and I see that now, was that I wanted to share her with the world, just like every mom gets to share their baby with the world. So I wasn't seeing her as being dead. I was seeing her as like
Your
just
baby.
being life and being my baby. And so it's all, like I say, it's everything backwards, right? So we, and I don't, people do ask like, how did you keep going after that? And I was never told we couldn't. And I think that's maybe like, because they never could say why this happened. It was just a fluke. Um, and it was this weird like limbo of, I knew it was possible to make it past the 12-week mark, but also exactly, what if this happens again? Or what if this is every child we have from now on? And um, but we did try again. And for me, it was always, I was already in the mindset of having this baby. So it didn't replace, but it was like just this continuum for me. That's I guess how I can say it. And at that time I felt that the risk of, or how do I say that? The pain of not having versus the pain of going through it again outweighed, kind of like I don't know. I never know how to explain that, but
Yeah, that makes
so we
sense
did.
though.
Yeah, does that? But we tried. So we tried again. Very quickly after, like, and we. So this was in like January 2017, the beginning of January 2017, and then the end of February, we I had a positive pregnancy test, but they'll never really know if it was just circulating hormones still from Kaya. But because it registered on a pregnancy test, they always say to include it. So it was, that was a weird thing for me too, because it was like I didn't know how to process that. I'm like, do I count it as a loss? Does it like it's so strange? But I very much, as soon as I seen that positive pregnancy test, whether it was remains of my daughter, it reminded me of that, or whether it was this new life, it was just this weird thought again, where I'm like, okay, I started working on the baby room again, and it was just like this this remotivator. But fast forward, we did have our son after that. And I always say that, like, how do you know, like, so that would have been our fourth loss, and then we went on to have our boy. But would I have stopped if there was another loss? Would I not? Like, that's where I don't know where my threshold would have, and you never know where that could have even went, if it would have been a later loss, a miscarriage. Like, it just goes on and on and on. And what you're like able to deal with, and people say, you're only dealt what you can handle, and I'm like, nobody can handle any of this. It's just, you have to. And I talk to so many parents that they're like, it's, yeah, you just, it's not a choice. It's just, you have to go on. Like,
Yeah.
and so we did have our son. I do say that I didn't take a lot of pictures with him, and just because I was so like, oh, this is just gonna end up in another dead baby book. Like I always feel weird when I talk, because it sounds so morbid, but it's the truth when you're in it. I was just so um detached on purpose to protect myself. But even though you say that in retrospect, but I'm like, I was very clearly attached to this baby. There's no way you can turn that off. But it was the best I could think of in my mind to like be like, okay, if I lose this baby, I haven't gone through all of the things that I've gone through writing and making books and doing all this stuff. But my counselor always said, and so it was around, I want to say like the 26-week mark, where she said, "But do you regret those pictures you ever took of Kaya?" Or and she's like, the answer was no, of course. And you can always choose what to do with them or not to look at them, or but you can't redo that. And it was that moment kind of that I'm like, you're right. Like, what if this baby actually lives? And um, and and I was very fortunate. And then now I've loaded up all my storage on my phone with pictures of them. But quickly after 16 months in between, we had our daughter Maylee, and we had started earlier because we assumed we would just lose. So it just shows, right? Like, but we knew it was possible. But then we didn't lose her, and we're like, oh my goodness, like, what? Yeah, it was such a surprise to us. So it was chaos, but I really do think it was how it was supposed to be with the two of them. Um, and then we found ourselves pregnant again, but this time it was a surprise pregnancy. And it was, so this next baby would have been a year old on our daughter's birthday. Which was like, I'm like, okay, like now we're nuts. We're completely, and that's the crazy part, is it's all we ever would have wanted. And then to go the other extreme where I'm like, my goodness, like now to have a surprise pregnancy. But again, how quickly I was already like prepping for this in my mind. I'm like, we can do this. It's going to be fine. Like, it's, it's like I was already in love. Um, and then we did lose that baby at around 7 weeks. And I just remember seeing butterflies always kind of with us with that one. So I was just like noting things again, like symbolisms and different things. And we waited a little while after that, but it sparked in me just the desire to have another baby, because my mind was already with that plan and that baby, and I could see it for our family. So yeah, we got pregnant again. And at this point, and it's kind of interesting because then we went from a surprise pregnancy where I was still very sad, but it was, and this is the things that you could slap yourself now for saying, but felt a little bit like a relief. So then there was like guilt and shame with that, because it was like, this did happen a little bit too soon. We were still just trying to navigate life with two littles, and realizing too that I had also like kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like delayed my grief in some ways too, because then we went from full tilt parenting, and then when these little swarms would come back, it was like, well, don't even think like that. Like, been there, done that. Your grief should be done. And like just the pressure we put on ourselves. So and even more, I think you should be so grateful and not complain of any of the normal things in pregnancy, or anything, like when there's carrots on the ceiling and there's like everyone's naked and everyone, and like, and I love that, but it's just real. Like sometimes I'd be taking videos to my friends where they're both screaming in the background, and I'm just like like I want to jump out a window. But it's, so there's also that added element, I think, that we put even more pressure on ourselves when we then do maybe have a baby. And so I was very much now in this place of, okay, we've had two healthy, beautiful babies. We've had a loss, but it was sort of, my mindset was different where I'm like, we're kind of out of the woods with um like terminal diagnosis type stuff. So we did get pregnant. I kind of at this point truly wasn't taking pictures at all because I was just running after the other two. But I remember going to my, again, the 20-week ultrasound and being like literally laying on the table and just being, and not at all in the moment, just okay, after this I got to get to the grocery store, and then I've got this mom group thing, and then I've got this dentist appointment, and I like just so in like this was just one more thing I had to do at that point. um and so I didn't like enjoy or take in looking at the ultrasound as much, because and it's not until they turn it to face you really too. But that is my biggest regret, because when the nurse, and she kind of got teary-eyed during, and I was sort of like picking up on things, and she goes, we just can't quite see everything we're looking for. So she goes, if you want to go to the bathroom. And I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, the radiologist was standing in the room, and he just kind of, he's like, oh, I hear you work here, like just trying to make kind of like small talk a little bit. And I knew, like, I was just like, what, like, why are you in here? And he said, your baby doesn't have any amniotic fluid. Without that, the heart, or sorry, the lungs won't develop. There's no kidneys. Like, your baby's gonna die. Like, just that was kind of blatantly um how he said it. And like, I actually think I said, what the F, like out loud. And that's what I mean. Like, your emotions, your grief, it all just comes out through you. And that's not who I normally am, but I was just, that is how I felt. I was like, what? Like, no, this, no way. Um, so then the worst part was that after that, I was left, but I never did get to look at the ultrasound screen. So it was almost like subconsciously, or however, like, now this baby wasn't worthy of being seen, or we could like it wasn't a question suddenly, oh, do you want to see your baby, right? Whereas every mom wants to see their baby. But to be fair, and I'll never know that, like, would I have been able to look? I don't know, like, what, because then you have a different element now attached to that baby. So I actually remember going back. I canceled, like kind of in a rush, like, I don't need these appointments anymore, like with my OB and different things, because it was just like, okay, this baby's gonna die. Here we go again. And it brought back a lot with Kaya too, because I remember I had bought all the maternity clothes for our first baby, and I remember like Philip was with me, and I just brought them back to the cashier. I'm like, I don't need these anymore. Like, it's just like just so dramatic, but it takes a hold of you. So I continued to go to my dentist appointment. They asked if because they couldn't really tell that I was pregnant, or it's sometimes a question not everyone asks, but um, also because he was 20 weeks but didn't have the amniotic fluid, I was a little smaller looking than you would be, I think, maybe at 20 weeks. So I somehow got away with them not asking, and they're like, do you want an x-ray today? And I remember just being like, yeah, go for it. Like, which normally those are the first things you're like, nope, like, I'm pregnant. And so it's just amazing, like, what your mind does. And so yeah, this time around, it was my husband who had more hope than me. Like, he was like, maybe, baby was too small, and they just, because we did end up doing another repeat just to confirm everything. But I was at this point like, no, like, I know too much, and there's, this is the end. And this was when it became like a big strain a little bit in our relationship, because I decided again that I wanted to hold this baby, and my husband very much didn't want to see this baby. And it wasn't for lack of love. I think it was lack of too much love that you can't take anymore. And these are the conversations that now, and I tell everyone that as best as you can. And there is just a difference from being a mom and a dad. There is, and it's just a truth. But those conversations, and it came out later that he said, holding my daughter, like, I still, get haunted from that at times at night. But like, no, I think just not from the fact that she wasn't beautiful or any of that. It was just the, just holding death, right? Um, so he had said that, and I'm like, you're trying to relate with him, but then you're also trying to think of yourself. And I knew if I couldn't, and that was just for me. Everyone's completely different because I see both. At that time, I'm like, it would just be easier. It felt like if somebody could knock me out, but that's not easy either. Like it's just
Right.
nothing's easy. And I know that completely. Um, but so I did decide, but we kind of compromised that he wouldn't hold our son. He didn't want to hold our son. That was totally like there was no pressure from me on that. But I just needed to. And again, I was so happy I did. And there again, it was like my two births, my two TFMRs, were the most beautiful births I ever had, and I had living babies. But it was just, it's just different. It's like it's the same in that you get to hold this baby, and that's all you want, and it doesn't matter how you get there. But it's, um, there's just a different element when you know you have to say goodbye, I think. Um, so then we did have our daughter Ada, a year after, and like to the day. And those are those things where you're like those beautiful synchronicities. Um, and then there's so much more to be said with that. But so she was, quote unquote, the rainbow baby. And at this time, I didn't really know I was doing this, but I had been writing a book because I had kept all these journal entries for each one of my babies along the way. And but that was always cathartic for me. It was just how I honored them, and never ever thought of doing anything with that. But it was when we lost Jude, that here's another book to add under my bed. And I was like, what is the purpose of all of this? So I did collect everything. I put it in one document just for family and friends. But it was this weird, like, okay, well, obviously that's the story everyone wants, like the hope of a rainbow baby at the end. That's the perfect conclusion. And obviously, like, so grateful. And we did have a traumatic delivery with her, as well as Maylee prior. But I always displaced that because it was like, I don't care how that happens, like baby's safe in here. Because I think, again, pregnancy loss, you kind of downplay anything you've gone through because you just, again, are so grateful. It's always this dance between like being so grateful but like so much pain at the same time. um so yeah, and I was like, we're complete. And we really were, because we were just somewhere we never imagined we would be. And then we had a surprise pregnancy, 2 years after. So we actually had lost, this past January. So 20, I'm like, what year are we in? 2023.
Yeah.
Um, and the weird part, and like talk about beautiful synchronicities. So that's what I really like based quite a bit of my book on, and just like all those beautiful signs that we see and that brings us comfort, because they truly do. And then it was slapped in my face because I was like, this baby was going to be due August 15th, which was the exact same day as our first loss. I'm like, well, that is full circle. Like, that is just, and we lost that baby. So I was like, oh, well, I'm full of crock. Like, I'm completely, everyone I tell, oh, that's a sign, or that means this, or, but in that moment, that was such a comfort for me. So I have to remember that too. And then we actually, it took us about I want to say like 5.5, like just shy of 6 months, to get pregnant again. And that was another experience which I can't even speak to in terms of people dealing with infertility. But that, and most people say, oh, that's pretty average. Like it takes 6 months to get pregnant, or 3 to 6 months. But I was never part of that group before. I was always, that was one thing, I guess, that it was always like, okay, at least, and I dread that word, but I could try again, and I could, and I never take that for granted. But this time it was very different, because I'm like, oh, what's happening? Why am I not getting pregnant right away after this? What's wrong with me? And And so then it kind of all of a sudden, the severity of that loss in January, which was a surprise pregnancy, um, was astronomical, like almost like where I'm like, this hurts worse than having lost Kaya and Jude, which were our TFMRs. And it's crazy to even say that, but it was because I think it was that finality of this really could be it now. Like, what if, and then so that changed a whole other thing. And then I just held on so deeply to that previous loss. Um, and so, like, for a very brief time, how debilitating that was on my life, I can only, like, it really opened my eyes to just what people do go through with fertility and um, on a very tiny scale. Like I would never say like, but just I'm like, my gosh, if that's how I felt for just like 5 months or whatever, like it was awful. And it's every consuming thought, even if I liked it or not. I was like, that is all I was focused on. I'm like, why am I not? What do I do to get pregnant? What like I need to do this, and I couldn't let go of the fact that the same thing had happened with our previous surprise where I'm like, well, now my mind was already consumed by this family of four now. And because it's true, we could have my husband that was right away, he's like, Carmen, you said we were complete. Like, let's just cut our losses, let's be done. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I can't. um
Well,
so
I think
yes,
you
we
start
do
imagining your life like that, and then it
100%.
like
Yeah.
awakens that in you where you're like, well, I don't want it to end on this loss, you
Right,
know?
exactly. No, exactly, Sarah. And so that is every loss mom who it's all the hopes and the dreams you had that you're also grieving and the milestones that continue to show up and that so in the end my book that was the conclusion was grief never ends, it changes, and I can really see that now, like how it's changed, but it's not for lack of, it gets easier in time or this all happened for a reason, or it's just because we are healing because we have to, or we find ways to get ourselves through to another day. Um, honestly, and then there's such strength, like that's what this community has become. I just see unbelievable strength, but we almost hate being told we're strong too because we're like, thank you, but like we'd much rather have our baby, but or like there's just so
Right.
many parts of that too. And again, because we have to be, and that's great that you're crediting that, but like this
You're like, this
again
isn't
wasn't
what
a
I wanted.
choice. No. And so now, and you're such an inspiration, Sarah, but it's these things where and now I find myself um but that was never the plan, never ever what I thought I'd see myself wanting to do. But I think it's because of the women I've met and the hearing the stories, and I'm like, I can't be done in this community. So now it's like, but now I've gone backwards, but it's now that I decided, because grief never ends and our story never ends. And it's a weird space to be in because I was always a lost mom, and now it's like I have kids, so I don't feel like I quite fit any group a little bit, just because I feel bad to talk about the kids I do have, but then to still talk about the ones that I've lost and having ones, it feels like it's tricky.
It is.
um it is, and I feel I find myself in a weird space because I've come such a long way, and that's amazing. I'm not the Carmen I was in 2016. And but it's like, how do you be sensitive to people who haven't had yet and try to give them hope that it could and may happen, or like even to say that, and then they're asking the same questions I've asked. How do you know that? How can you say that? How, like, which is true. And I'm like, when I was going through it, somebody else believed it would happen for me, whether it was my mom or my Oma or somebody, when I couldn't believe it for myself. Like it was very like I needed to know somebody was believing. um, but then what do you do when it doesn't happen? And how do you support that? And then the guilt of, oh well, it happened for me, like, and then you just feel guilty, and that's all I've ever wanted. So I just, anyways, I give you such props in doing what you do, and just but seeing the community and the stories, and I think that's truly what keeps me going in for the next generation, to start having these conversations, sharing these stories, because I think that is the only way we heal, but also the only way we know how to support each other is by being open and offering ways and things that helped and didn't. And everyone's different, of course, but I really think about that because it's such a topic that I was telling Sarah earlier when we started, like both Sarah and I kind of started our journeys in 2016. And there we felt so alone. And there was one book I was handed after losing Kaya that was like what to do when your baby dies. And it was very like guidebook, textbook, and that was all there was. It felt like, but there's a movement happening, but I think just having these conversations, we get to genuinely ask each other like how can we help you feel supported in this, um and just because that's all at the end of the day, that's all we want to do for each other and ourselves. Like how do we support ourselves? What do we want? What does, so I think it's amazing to see where we've come by accident, and how it's just formed such a community. And it's like it's across the board. Every platform I see, but it's um one of the closest connections you feel to somebody that you've never connected with because you're
It is.
instantly it is. And I can't say it better than that. Like I'm like I you just it's just this instantaneous, like I could message anyone who is a lost mom and you're right away like you're just it's the most incredibly horrible thing again, right? So that's that's kind of my why now, is how do I support people and just start to share my story. And if it resonates, amazing. If there's things that I can do to help, even better. But yeah, I think, and because there's so many women and so many different, like, there's so many pieces that not one person can speak to. So I think you just kind of collectively that we all work together to hit those that need it. And just the biggest thing, just knowing you're not alone, because that it doesn't make it stop. And we know that this will never go away. And that would be my number one goal, is just eradicate baby loss.
That would be amazing.
That is, I mean, I'm like, I'm going big. but no, it's just because we know that even more so, I'm like, how do we flip the script for the next generation? And I do think it starts in these small ways, but big ways too. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so your doctors never found out, I mean, yours were all just separate kind of losses that they just said, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry,
And
like,
it's, and I think that's like, that was always a hard pill to swallow too, because not that, like, because again, I work in the hospital. So many families, you don't want to know a diagnosis because it's scary, but having that diagnosis, you have an answer or an idea, or you can do research or kind of like just familiarize, educate. So I've always heard from people, it's the unknowing that's almost the worst. And I'm in this weird place because had we not had living babies, um, I that would have even been more devastating. Like, how do you not know what's happened? And I think to a fault, in a good way, because we once we had our son, we knew that it was possible to have a healthy baby, which we're so grateful for, obviously. But it changed our mindset, because we would have, if we didn't know and these things kept happening, eventually you do lose hope. Like, or at least I think I would have, because it's like, well, we don't know why, but but because we knew it was possible, that's almost what kept us going a little bit. It was like that we know that, our track record was 1 in 4 will die. That's just how it kind of seemed to play out for us. And but still, that fourth one every time did come. But it's like, how much are you willing to, like that's a whole other thing. But no, they never found out. They did say, because it was Potter's sequence and DeGeorge, they were totally unrelated. Diagnoses, because that's the other thing. I'm like, if it was the same diagnoses again, then you get a little more suspicious. but they did say that they will keep our chart open so that, in future medical research and things, it is something that maybe down the line they'll be able to have answers for. Um, so that it's just an odd thing. And now it's more that I'm always curious for my own children, because, or even my sisters and brothers and stuff, because it's like, if I had to go through this, how can I prevent you guys, if I can know something in some way, or at least know what to send you for testing for, or know what to like look for, those kind of things. um so yeah, that's a whole other that was a really good question. Like, just um I'll never know the why, but it yeah it and then my granny, that's almost the things you start doing, is you now search through family things that you never knew before. So my granny also had 7 losses, and she lost one around 20. She was in the 20-week mark as well. And it was my mom who told me this, and otherwise, like, I never would have inquired about that or known about that either. So it's like, maybe there is some family link that skipped a generation, but we still don't know what that is. But so it's like it's interesting, because otherwise, had that not, like, that conversation or that knowledge about my granny, again, I wouldn't have known too. So it's wild.
I know you're right, though. It really does like open up all the conversations that you never would have had before or never would have known before, but I feel like are important for you to know, especially if there's like a history of it in your family, but nobody talks about it. So then you're just over here like, why me?
Of course. And Philip and I would joke, because they were doing genetic workups on ourselves. And we started looking at each other funny. And it sounded like, because your dark humor comes out through this, but it was like, oh, yeah, you do kind of have low set ears. And then he was like, yeah, your lip is kind of thin. And we were just high functioning. And it's like, it's funny and it's not, but like, that is the truth until you start your family building journey. And I don't know if that's helpful or not to people, to just, even in your younger years or advocating to get checked out or get blood work done prior to having a family. I don't know, like, that's just, I'm just saying that out loud as I think of it. But we never had any reason to get ourselves checked out until going through this too. So it's like, that's also a weird thing. It's like, because there was never a reason to. We were otherwise, I mean, we're never normal, but we were like, we were
Right. And
functioning.
it's not
So
something they do on just everybody.
exactly. So it's a interesting, like, what people may find by accident, and you hear of that so often, that they're like, I didn't know I was a carrier for this. And that's devastating too, because how could you know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I can
Yeah,
say
I
is
know.
it's a lot to think about when you go through loss and, especially
For
recurrent
sure.
loss and infertility, just any of it. It's just, and,
Mhm.
like you said too, that sometimes just weird thoughts will kind of cross your head and you're like, why did I even think that? But it's how
Yeah,
you feel in the
100%.
moment.
Yep. Yep. And I think, I mean, take it or leave it, but they are just emotions that come up. Like, it doesn't mean that's necessarily actually how you like think or process the world, or it's just, but let it just be that. It's like, we are all feeling different things, and it's all part of part of it, for
Exactly.
sure. Yeah.
So I know you mentioned your book a little bit. Where can people get the book if they're interested?
Yeah. So I have heard that it is in Walmart's, like, I think online in the States. But it is on Amazon.com, .ca. I am from Canada. Demeter Press is the actual house that I published with, but shipping costs are a monster. So I do lead people just more the Amazon route, because it is easier for them that way. But yeah, that's if you yeah, I weirdly find it easier if you Google Carmen Grover, like just my name, rather than a diary too, because there's a lot of diaries out there,
Oh yeah,
I
that's a
realize.
good point.
But yeah, no, that's where you can find a copy of our journey. And that's the thing, is I wrote this book, but now I started this Instagram account, like I said, backwards, but just because I'm like, our it doesn't just end with a book. Like it's not just like okay, and it's just a snippet in life at that time. And we keep growing and evolving and changing, and yeah, like it's so yeah, so that's where I'm at.
And if people wanted to follow your Instagram account, is it the same name as the
Yeah.
book or?
So that one's, yeah, it's actually a diary to our babies, so it's another diary, but yeah, that was my the best I could do. I was like, I'll use the same name and tweak it a little bit.
I know sometimes it's hard, like all the names are taken and you're like,
Oh my
oh,
gosh,
like I
I
have to come up with
know.
some random name over here that no one will ever be able to spell.
Right? Yeah, and then you add some numbers in there, different things.
Right.
I know. Yeah.
It's like when you're having to create a password on a site, it has to be like 12 characters with all this. I'm like, you're just asking for me to never remember this and reset every time. Like I'm never gonna remember.
No, and then you hope that your phone does, and then as soon as you're like, yeah, it's so true.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share, Ad?
I was just thinking, what was I gonna add? Just how what I did I just actually before popping on with Sarah came from my doctor's office, and he he's meeting me for like he's a new doctor to me this time around. So he was really sweet and just saying, "Oh, I just it helps just to kind of know the person." And he actually asked all the questions that I didn't think I was gonna have to repeat because they're all on the chart, but what number of pregnancy is this, and that kind of thing. So it kind of caught me off guard, I guess, a little bit. But my whole thing is that I'm trying to open up more about that and talk about it. So I did tell him 11. And then he said, my mom, so my grandma, I guess, had 7 losses. And then she had my mom, and that was her only child she ever had. And she named her Angela. And and he's like, that's exactly what she is. She's an angel. And he just said that. And I just found such comfort because it was, again, this conversation you wouldn't have had, but it was like, um, I don't know, a tribute because he was changed by it too, because he was kind of like even more sympathetic, but also um how he's like that thing again where I don't want to say too much, like talk everything happens for a reason, but he's like she that's what she was to him, was an angel. So that previous mom had had those 7 losses and still went on to have her, and that ended up being her only child. I don't know. It really spoke volumes to me in however which way you want to take it. Um, and then what he did, and I've never had this done before, was he used the Doppler, and he said because he used to deliver like for 15 years, you said, and he got it so that you could hear my heartbeat with the baby's heartbeat at the same time. I've never had that, and it because sometimes you hear yours and you're like, oh no, like because then it's like it's low or what it's just, again, all these things keep coming back up, but and it was like this wick, wick, wick. So it kind of sound like and he's like, it sounds like a snowstorm or like horses galloping or like rap or whatever, right? But it was honestly, it was like this, wow, like there's my heart with this baby's heart together, and that is what I wish to convey, is like that's always with us. So like that, and now I wished I had taken a video or something that's always, but that is like what we're going for. Like they're not maybe here physically, but they are always with us in our heart. And like actually hearing that play out in music in a way was just so comforting. And I think that's where I am now. And I say that to people that, but had my story been different, that's what I mean. Like I couldn't be talking to you today had I not had any living children, but like, it is the truth. And um but more and more, and it almost now seems to happen without me bringing it up, because it's not something you just bring up usually. But I met a woman that she just said, I had 2 losses and we never did have kids, and she blatantly said it. She said it's something that will carry with me the rest of my life. She's like, um, she says, she's an author now and she writes, but she says that's just kind of what happened because this happened, but not because I wanted it to happen. But she said still, like, she'll see a child that's 8 years old and like the same age as her daughter would have been, and different things. And so it was interesting seeing that perspective, and but also how people will just share these things. Um, and then there's like that just that piece of, for a moment, you're right there with them. So that, and also for me, I, with this pregnancy, I put a lot of pressure on me because we very much like, this is our final pregnancy. But I always say too, like, you never actually have to say that, truly. Like, you never need to be like done, quote unquote, or even owe that to anyone. But as of right now, we feel very strongly, and I think there's like, I'm trying to take it in all in, but there's a lot that's been coming back. And so I guess what my parting words are is, I was reflecting on like Kaya and Jude, and all of our losses along the way. And in the moment when you're going through it, all you see is the grief, and all you like, you can't see those beautiful moments. And you're not supposed to. I don't think, like, you're so in it. But I would look back and I'm like, when I was pregnant with Jude and my kids were giving me raspberry kisses on my belly, and those are some of my fondest memories. And then when I had Ada, and this is pregnancy after loss, I didn't let them do that because I was scared. Well, what if I lose this? Then they lose that, and I, like, they're getting attached. But the point was that they got to enjoy that. Then I got to enjoy it. The baby got to enjoy that. Nobody can take that from you. And so I was finding it hard this time around because I'm like, I want to enjoy this, but that dreaded anatomy scan, I couldn't get it out of my head. I'm like, something bad's gonna happen. It's 100%, like, I already know. Or now me knowing, does that cause something? Like, it's just blah, your mind. But I took myself to like a belly dancing class, um, where we honored our bumps, and I was almost like gonna back out of it because I'm like, why would I do this if this baby's just gonna die anyways? Like, it's awful to say it, but it was truly what I was feeling. And I ended up going, and I thought, I have this hilarious video of us all like bumping around with our bellies. And it was a beautiful way to, like, regardless of what happened, to honor this baby within right now. And and at that moment I was pregnant today, and you don't know what tomorrow brings, but I was so grateful because I'm like, whether this baby lives or dies, that belly bumping memory, is a memory I get to keep and have. And so that's where I'm at on this journey right now. That could change again, but I really reflected with that. As it's not easy to do, though, I will say that. But like, if you can muster up in just even the smallest moments, that you go to a park and you have a tea with your baby or something, like, it can be so small, but just being so mindful in those moments, with who you're with, and even if it's just thoughts of your baby, it doesn't have to physically be here. Yeah, so that's that's my parting words.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So that was a rambling tangent, but it's it's when you let someone talk, it's amazing where it goes. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for sharing your story with us. Your journey has definitely been such a long one, full of both heartbreak and joy. And it really struck me how you talked about your termination for medical reason births being the most beautiful of all the births, and how you wanted to hold them both because you didn't know if you would get to hold a baby that you get to bring home. It made me think about my delivery with Jasmine, who was stillborn at 32 weeks. Giving birth to her, knowing the outcome, it was just the absolute hardest thing. And I remember crying and telling my husband, I just can't do this. To have to give birth knowing what the outcome was. But when I saw her, I just had pure love for her. Absolute grief for the situation. But she was beautiful, and it was still the first moment that I got to meet my daughter. Birthing your baby after a loss is heartbreaking, yet beautiful. You mourn for the loss of your child and everything you lost along with this. But you get to meet your baby for the first time, and you get to see their beauty and their perfection. You just feel absolute pure love for them. It's all just so complicated. But I'm glad you pointed this out because it shows just another layer of the birth and the loss that so many of us lost parents go through. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Please leave a review or a rating on Apple or Spotify if you like the show. It only takes a moment and it really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.